Hi, my name's Choi. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna do a wrap up of all the books that I read from January till April, so like the first 4 months of the year. I talked about some of them in the vlog that I put up a little while ago, but I thought it was time to actually give you my proper thoughts and ratings reviews. I'm gonna keep it really quick because I need to run off to uni very soon. There were some good books, a lot of kind of okay books, and a variety of genres. I'm gonna go through them by genre, so not chronologically or anything. But if you want to stay up to date with what I'm reading as I'm reading it, then follow me on Storygraph down below. Okay, it seems that it is impossible for me to film a video all in one take, so I'm coming with 2 extra books that I read since filming this video because it's just taken me that long to edit. Not full reviews, but just overall thoughts. I read The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. I borrowed it from my library and I literally read it in one night. I was obsessed. I loved it so much. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Basically, our main character works at this secretive, mysterious government agency in the UK, and they have somehow come across time travel, and they have brought people back from like way long ago in time to the present day. And so the main character is a bridge, so sort of a guide and supposed to kind of be like a friend, but also like watching over these people who've been brought back from time to see if they can actually acclimatize and if it works. There's a lot of unknowns and it's a bit of a mystery that unravels. That part of it was very cool and one of the things that kept me gripped. But honestly, the main amazing thing about this book is the characters. I was really obsessed with them and I was obsessed with their character dynamics. I thought the dialogue and everything was so funny. The theme around displacement, because these people are basically kind of displaced in time, but the author and also the main character is also Cambodian or like half Cambodian, and so like also how it relates to her identity and experience with like displacement. That was interesting as well. It was written really well. Like there were some killer lines. Literally in the first chapter I read 1 or 2 lines that made me go ooh, and I was like, I'm not just reading for 10 minutes before bed. I know I'm going to be staying up late with this book and I know I'm going to love it. Like it was instant. It was really good. I strongly recommend it. And the other book that I read pretty quickly was Growing Up Indian in Australia, and it's edited by Arti Bedigeri. I actually haven't read every single story in this. There's like a lot of contributions and they're all very short. It's pretty much non-fiction, like a lot of essays and some kind of autobiographical or memoir style pieces of writing. I think I read about 75% of them, and it's basically what it says on the cover. It's really about the experience of being brown in Australia, a very white dominated society where there has been this strong push to assimilate, and so a lot of it is about battling the dual identities, not quite fitting in Australia, but not quite fitting in India either, and experiences of racism. Those are probably the biggest themes. Also, like relationship to parents. If I had read this when I was in high school, maybe I would have gotten a lot out of it. I think just where I am at personally, none of these really hit that deep or like made me think differently. It just feels like a few steps back from how I am currently exploring and questioning identity. I don't think it's like wrong and I don't think it's bad to explore some of these themes. I just felt very meh about it. Not all of them feel that well written or interesting. Like it kind of just feels quite repetitive. It's whatever. I found it for free actually in one of my like street libraries when I was walking to the tram. So I think I'm gonna go and return it to that exact street library. But I'm glad I read it because there's one person in here that I do kind of know. So I liked hers, which is good. Just wanted to shout out those, mostly because I wanted to gush about The Ministry of Time, but back to the main video. The first book I have to talk about is a popular one. It's Funny Story by Emily Henry. I listened to this on audiobook from my library. It was a bit of a random decision because I don't usually read romance and I don't tend to love it, but I had been hearing so much about Emily Henry that I thought I could give it a go. So this was fun, but I still feel the same way about romance. I just think it's maybe not the genre for me. The main character, Daphne, has just been dumped by her like fiance for his best friend, and she ends up living with that best friend's partner. So they've both basically been broken up with. And there's some fake dating, but also like she's trying to find herself again because she's moved to this town and like basically become part of a group of friends that all really belong to her ex. And so now she's like, what am I doing here? What I liked about it, the main female character, Daphne, I kind of resonated with her and I liked her. I liked Miles as well, but I guess I connected to him a bit less. I think it was fun, and I like how the story explored the town and like different spots. That was one of the reasons I wanted to read it, because there was this theme about, yeah, finding your community. But it didn't really stick with me or blow me away either. Like, it was just fine. I did feel like some of the emotional resolutions for them, where they would like have these conversations and sort of unpack or share and support each other, they felt a little bit too like storybook perfect, and they didn't feel super real to me, so they didn't hit me any deeper, I think. This isn't necessarily a negative of the book, but I just don't get a lot out of the like romance and sweetness, which makes me feel like I'm just not a romance reader. Like, it just doesn't do anything for me and it doesn't interest me enough. I did give it 3.5 stars, so yeah, not bad at all. I also feel like I probably had more thoughts that I just didn't write down and I don't remember, so that's the other thing, it's just not memorable for me, but it was fine to listen to. Next, we're going to move on to some fantasy books. A lot of more kind of magical realism vibes than all that fantasy. So right at the start of the year, I read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and I'd been waiting for this for so long because it was so popular back in the day when I first started BookTube, but it was so disappointing. I gave it 2 stars, which is harsh, but I really didn't like it. I thought it was so boring. I did not give a fuck about the characters, and I was like, when is the plot gonna happen? And when the plot did happen, I still could not care less. I didn't like the writing at all. The dialogue felt really unnatural. I felt like we were being told but not shown a lot of things, like especially just the characters. Basically, this story and the series follows like children who enter into magical worlds, like maybe it's like, you know, kind of Narnia-esque. They enter the underworld or something, and then they find their way back to regular kind of Earth, and this is a school where they are supported to like get back into normal life, I guess. We're not really shown the worlds and like stories that these kids have gone through. Like, it's very much, in this book at least, just them existing in this school. So I think it was like a mix of, there wasn't enough interesting storytelling going on, but also the characterization we were given in this book was really off-putting to me. So like, maybe it would be a little bit more interesting to like follow a specific character into their world, which I think is what happens in the rest of the series, but I just didn't have a good enough experience to be interested in it, so I don't think I'm gonna continue. I'd be interested to know from people who have read the series if it gets better, but even if it does, like, I'm not gonna continue. I just wanna know, like, do other people feel this way? Like, I've never heard a bad critique of this book. Like, people genuinely like it, so I'm like, what's going on? The next fantasy I read was A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, another really popular one that's been on my list for so long. I finally got to it. Listened to this on audiobook as well. I had a lot of audiobook listens. Every Heart a Doorway was also on audiobook, by the way. But yeah, Song of Achilles is retelling of Achilles' Greek tragedy vibes. I actually don't know anything about classics. Patroclus, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but he kind of forms this friendship and then kind of lovers relationship with Achilles and follow them from their childhood up until the Trojan War. I also thought this was good. I gave it 3.5 stars, like maybe almost a 4. I really liked the writing. It was so beautiful and so poetic. The early part of the book where Patroclus and Achilles go up to a mountain and are kind of mentored and learning how to fight, but also like medicine and how to use the natural world, I guess. That part I found really beautiful. I did really enjoy the kind of, yeah, mythology retelling and how the story was told. I was definitely invested in the characters. I wasn't like deeply invested in their romance as such. Like, I found it interesting, and I think it was more their development as young boys and then young men that was more interesting to me, and absolutely their relationship dynamics, but it wasn't like a romance that I was like, oh my god, my heart. It was more just interesting to see them develop, yeah, in this kind of really hard world. Achilles, he is an interesting character. He's so freaking frustrating, and yeah, I think it was like almost an unsatisfying ending, but not in a bad way. Like I think that is kind of the point, and like that is what the story is sort of setting you up to do. I didn't have big faults with it. I just, again, don't think it really stuck with me. So it was nice to read, and I think I would read Circe as well, but I'm not like gravitating towards it either. And then possibly my favorite of the fantasy books I read was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I am, entering the world of adult fantasy, and this definitely was my jam. It was a lot slower. It's not like an epic high fantasy. It's following this young boy Fitz, who is the bastard son of one of the princes in this kingdom, and he enters the court but in a sort of precarious position, and gets trained as an assassin because he's a liability to the throne, but also they like don't want to kill him off and they want to make him useful, I guess. So it's him navigating the politics of the sort of court and also of broader society as he also grows up and just like figures out his place in the world, deals with very like rough and complicated mentor figures. I talk a little bit about like the themes around the magic that I found interesting in my vlog. So yeah, I'm not going to comment on it too much. I think I am going to read the next 2 books in my next like vlog and give my thoughts on like the series as a whole. And I know there's like a whole set of series set in this world. Yeah, this was a good introduction. Really loved the storytelling and really loved the characters. Like I had the most fun with these characters compared to a lot of these books I read. It's not super dramatic, but the stakes feel really high, and yeah, you just kind of care about all of them. And also hate some of the characters. Final fantasy book I have is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I also really enjoyed this one. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I think that might be a bit harsh. Like I think I could give it a 4 stars. It was really fun to read. Every evening I was just really excited to get my little treat of mystical, whimsical world of The Starless Sea. This is the author that wrote The Night Circus, and similar to that book, this is quite a sprawling and mysterious and atmospheric book. It's a really big book, and that would probably be my biggest complaint. Like in the final 20% of the book, I was starting to get sick of it. This one actually does start off with a bit more of a plot. It's very much like a mystery. It's like an unraveling mystery. So it's not always clear where you're going, and it can be a little bit convoluted. It's about stories, and it has like the main plot, but it also, you get snippets of these little storybooks that have something to do with the main plot, but you don't know exactly where they fit in together. And sometimes that layering of stories and jumping back and forth in time and between different characters who you're like kind of introduced to, but you don't really know who they are and how they connect to like later on in the story. Like all of those layers could get a little bit complicated. For the first half or 2/3 of the story, it was totally fine to be a little bit lost because everything was written so beautifully, and it was just intriguing enough that I was like, I want to see how this all wraps up together. But I didn't think it was wrapped up super neatly. I think that's okay. Like I think the vibe that Erin Morgenstern was going for was very much like sprawling stories. You don't know exactly where they lead. I don't know. I think it's definitely a book like you're going along for the ride, and if you enjoy the writing style and the atmosphere, you'll have a good time with it. I'd love to reread The Night Circus. I really enjoy her writing. There's also like supposedly a bit of romance in this book. I don't think the romance was very strong, but I didn't care. Like that didn't change my enjoyment of it. I just think, just letting you know, romance is like a theme and an element that drives the plot and characters forward, but like it's not really something you're gonna get much out of in this book. I think that that's similar to The Night Circus. I remember there being a lot of discourse about how it's a slow burn romance, where people were like, there's no romance at all. Basically, same vibes. Erin Morgenstern is here for the vibes and the atmosphere, not for the romance or the plot so much. Okay, let's move on to literary fiction. I read Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I reread Normal People at the end of last year, and I loved it. It was one of my favorites things that I read last year. I've had this for a little while. I literally found it on the side of the road for free, and it was like kind of wet in the rain, but now it has like a really fun texture. This book follows quite similar themes that seem to be apparent in a lot of Sally Rooney's work. Young, early 20s, female uni student who forms a relationship, a messy relationship with an older man, but also the broader kind of social contexts that they're navigating. In this book, Frances is an aspiring writer, and she has a best friend, Bobby, and they form this relationship with like an older couple, and that's where that messy relationship begins. So it's like also them navigating, yes, being young, like uni students, but forming these relationships with like slightly older group of people. I think it's definitely not bad, but the way I described it in my Storygraph review is that it's like a beta version of Normal People. Like I feel like it had very similar themes, and you can see the starts of her writing style, but it's just not as good. In Normal People, every detail is very pointed and specific, and it reveals something about the characters and building tension. I think Normal People is actually third person, whereas this one is first person, so you get a little bit more insight into the main character's internal world. I think a lot of those details in this book were unnecessary and at times kind of pretentious and annoying. It felt like it was there for decoration rather than actually drawing me in and telling me something about the characters and the dynamics. So I think that is just like her developing as an author, I guess. It just meant that I wasn't as drawn into it. I was a little bit more bored almost and also frustrated, or maybe it's like it hits too close to home, because not necessarily in my relationships, but relationships I've seen around me. Maybe it's a sign that it did something well, actually, because some of the shit that like Frances and Nick pull, I had a visceral reaction to, because I was like, I've been the friend hearing about that kind of situation, and it's a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. Like, I'm glad I read it, and I don't mind that at all, even if I didn't love reading it. But it is just really interesting. Like, I think this would be really interesting as like a book club pick. Yeah, 3 stars in the end. Sally Rooney knows how to write really good characters and character dynamics, so that is still there. Also, maybe this is more like contemporary fiction than literary fiction. I don't really know genres. But the next book I read, I did enjoy a lot, and that was Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I'm also running so late, so I'm going to be really quick with this and come back to talk about my non-fiction another time. It's kind of like short stories, but they are all interlinked, and they each follow a different female main character who like lives in the UK, mostly like black characters. It's really about a black experience in the UK, and also very intergenerational, and that was my favorite part of it. It was really emotional, and the kind of mother-daughter relationships were the ones that hit the hardest for me. The final chapter, really got me. There are some really heavy themes in it as well, specifically around like sexual assault, a number of other things as well, that I'll put in the description. But it was also filled with so much life and joy. So just like the full breadth of human experience. The characters are really brought to life. I really like the writing style. I don't know how to describe it. It's unique, I think, at least from what I've read. So complex, but so lovable. You feel so much empathy for all of them. You're rooting for all of them. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved the first couple stories that follow like a very queer, radical, very like pretentious as well, but very amusing commentary on these little radicals, and also a bunch of queer characters, which I loved, wasn't expecting. Really, really good. Love this. It's beloved for a reason. Okay, I went to university, so I'm back now to quickly finish. Before we go to non-fiction, there was a short story collection I read called After Australia by Michael Muhammad Ahmad. And this was a collection of kind of imagined realities, a little bit of speculative fiction, I guess, from a bunch of POC and First Nations authors writing kind of around whiteness, but also beyond whiteness. They covered quite a broad spectrum, so hard to summarize it, but yeah, I talked about this in my vlog as well. I found it a little bit disappointing. I think a lot of the stories just had kind of interesting concepts, but not explored that well in my opinion. And I also didn't love the actual writing or narrative in a lot of them, so unfortunately it was a bit of a miss for me. I didn't give it a rating in the end, but yeah, I just didn't enjoy it a lot. However, in contrast, the two non-fiction books that I read, I loved. Firstly, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I gave it 5 stars and I feel like I've been raving about it in the comments of so many videos because I absolutely loved it. It's a new favorite for sure. I listened to it on audiobook and would really recommend that format. I know that people have said that it can be a bit long and repetitive, and I totally understand that. I can see why it would be hard to get through, but the audiobook saved it for me because I love her voice. She narrates it herself, and especially for audio, I'm often listening while I'm doing something else. So the repetition of themes and ideas was really useful for me because I feel like I have a very strong sense of the point that she was getting across. So if you enjoy her storytelling and her writing style, which I thought was absolutely beautiful, super poetic, super alive with the senses, because the kind of themes around this book are our relationship to nature, but also like to other people. It's very evocative. So if you enjoy all of those things and you enjoy her voice, which I cannot imagine anyone not feeling soothed and welcomed by her narration, then I think you could totally like get through the book and find a lot out of it. The premise is that the author is an Indigenous woman, but also a botanical scientist, I think, and she is exploring the relationship between scientific knowledge and Indigenous knowledge, and she has a huge respect for both and wants to explore what kind of heart-led science that is also informed by Indigenous ways of knowing and living can provide. I think especially if some of those ideas are new to you, like, this is a fantastic place to start. I really think like everyone should read it, genuinely. You don't need to be interested in nature and plants. Oh, the sun is out while I'm talking about this, which is really nice. There is like a decent amount of heaviness to it. Like there's one chapter about the nation of maples, I think that was the name of the chapter, that really struck me and left me with a lot of like climate grief. Colonialism is obviously a big theme as well, and like dispossession from land and culture and language and all of that. But at the same time, it is very hopeful as well. At least for me, it felt very grounding and hopeful because it's so rooted in like, we can live a different way and we have this opportunity. There is a lot of celebration of that like love, loving relationships, especially if you're feeling any kind of climate doom or just doom about politics in general. I think this can be a really grounding thing to be like, hey, like we have something good to live for and fight for, and different ways we can change. I guess the lessons that resonated for me the most and stuck with me was about reciprocity. She talks a lot about reciprocity of the land. It's not like the nature is damaged and we need to fix it. It's actually about our relationship with nature. There's a role for human interaction with nature rather than like thinking of it as we need to have these like conservations that humans stay out of. Like, it's not about untouched nature. It's about how, especially like the Indigenous ways of interacting with nature are like, do they provide something to these ecosystems as well as to us? So I think that was really interesting, and she definitely encourages all of us to form that better relationship with the land. I have a couple quotes. One was that restoring land without restoring relationship is an empty exercise. It is relationship that will endure and relationship that will sustain the restored land. And I think that's so true. Like, we can't just have environmentalism without actually thinking about our culture and the value that we put to nature, and that has to be active. Another quote she says is, in learning reciprocity, the hands lead the heart. That one is like a good prompt for me because I'm in like a world of like environmental and climate in activism, and so there's like a lot of value put towards Indigenous culture and values, but it's still very separate to me and how I actually live and what I do day to day. It's something I really feel I need to explore. And like, she even suggests like the first starting place is to have a garden, and I'm like, yes, I should just start a herb garden. Like, it doesn't have to be anything big and amazing. Like, yeah, another quote I really liked was, the consumption-driven mindset masquerades as quality of life, but eats us from within. It is as if we've been invited to a feast, but the table is laden with food that nourishes only emptiness. Those quotes, I think, more represent some of the ideas that I really liked, but her storytelling is really beautiful and there's a lot of personal anecdotes. There's a lot of love in this book. I feel like that's the biggest thing that I feel when I think about it and that I want to share with you all. I'm like, read this book to experience some love in your life. The other non-fiction I read was The Trauma of Caste by Thanmozhi Sundararajan, and the subtitle is A Dalit Feminist Meditation on Survivorship, Healing and Abolition. Thanmozhi is a Dalit person living in America, but Dalit is kind of like the under castes within the South Asian, mainly Hindu caste system. However, the book explores how caste is so pervasive that it shows up across religious lines in South Asia as well as in diasporas, because we obviously carry all of those politics with us, but also like the way that diasporas invisibilize this and kind of act as if caste doesn't exist anymore. Like that happens in South Asia and in India, but especially in our communities, and I've also felt this, like we've all migrated here and we're all equal now and caste supposedly doesn't affect us, but there is a long history and continued repression and violence towards Dalit people. And at the same time, this book is taking much more of a like survivor and like healing kind of perspective on it, centering the actual like lived experience and embodied experience of caste is really important. She says in a quote, "I call for healing the caste soul wound to be the necessary prerequisite for caste abolition, a project in which both the caste privileged and the caste oppressed reckon with their terrible legacies related to caste and work to make legible its somatized, impacts on bodies, relationships, and communities." So she explores that a little bit and offers some like frameworks and ways to approach that within our communities. And as activists as well, she talks about things from the perspective of an activist and organizer within your communities, which I absolutely loved because I'm like exploring doing my own community organizing with South Asians here in Melbourne, and like what does it mean for us in Australia, the way these cycles of conflict and oppression can be perpetuated even when we don't realize it, especially when we don't realize it, and also like living as settlers on stolen land in Australia, and like we can't be depoliticized and just be like, oh, we're brown people but like we deserve to be here because we're migrants who worked hard. It's like, what is our relationship? Anyway, that's a whole tangent. My laptop just died, so I can't even read the other quotes from the book, but like I might insert one or two if I think they're really important. I think that holistic view of understanding like these systems is really important and something she does really well. She connects the system of Brahmanism that has created caste and that puts, you know, Brahmins or upper caste people on a higher pedestal. Even when some of that has been technically removed, that system still exists in the same way that, you know, racism still exists in the US and Australia. She does connect it to like ideas around abolition. She also talks about like modern day slavery and how that is very much informed by caste. Like India is one of the top three, if not potentially the highest like rate of modern day slavery, as well as actually that relationship to land. Adivasi, which is a word to refer to indigenous people or tribes in South Asia, also fall into this umbrella of undercaste, and Dalit people also have often been laborers of the land. So it also like touches on that. So I really liked all of those themes being brought together. I think it was really great from the perspective of someone who's already been thinking about this and is like in quite progressive and sort of activisty, but also kind of academic at times, circles of people. I don't know what it would be like as a real intro to these ideas because, you know, at times it can feel a bit wishy-washy, I guess. Like that's a harsh way to think about it. I think it makes sense because she can't exactly lay out how we defeat caste, like the caste system, in the way that you can't really write a book about how to dismantle racism. A lot of it is about how you approach it. And I think that's the most important message she kind of writes about, is that the way we actually show up is informed by trauma. So you can't like deal with all of the theoretical or material impacts of caste without unlearning and like deeply working on how it comes up in your body, and like the, you know, the feeling of defensiveness or the feeling of fear. I feel like I'm rambling now. I like it because it feels grounding. It's not a manual, it's not an explanation for everything. It does cover some of the basics, like where caste has come from in the kind of religious texts, and how it shows up kind of politically or economically, and all of these things. So it still lays out a lot for you, but it's not like a read this to learn more about the topic. To me, it is much more a piece for people who are interested in this long term and willing to do work on it. And in that way, it's really important as like a grounding place for how you show up to be anti-caste or to be a caste abolitionist. I think it's very important for anyone South Asian to read, but I also think it's interesting for people in especially Western countries where there are a lot of South Asian communities. She does talk about the urgency of it now because there's nationalism coming from South Asia. I mean, right now, like this past week, there has been a lot of escalation in Kashmir, and you know, the international community is very interested in looking at it as like a global conflict. Are India and Pakistan going to go to war? And that's a very limited perspective because you're not actually thinking about the people of Kashmir who are being fucked over from both ends, just as an example. So like it is relevant to global politics, I guess, but also because South Asians are showing up a lot more in the Western world, and there are some interesting ways that South Asians will maintain hierarchies and oppression. And I think it's important to be very critical beyond like thinking about diversity. Actually, there's a lot to unpack within the South Asian community and what brown people were putting up on a pedestal. I could talk about these things forever, and I think a lot of those themes and ideas will come up in some of my vlogs if I continue to explore some of that political side and what I'm actually doing. So thanks for any nerds or interested people who've stuck around to hear my ramblings about all of this. I'm gonna end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. Please talk to me in the comments about any books that you have read. If you have thoughts on any of the things I talked about, or are interested in any of these books. You can also share what you've been reading, or if this reminds you of anything you've read. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.